How you doing, everyone? Welcome back to our second update of the year. We're going to be going through a few of the interesting options, I like to call it, at this stage of the season, obviously being 60 odd days away, not counting, I promise. But a couple of months away now from the season. We're here, we're going to analyze four different teams to start us off, and some of the guys that I think we should probably think a little bit about. We'll delve right into predicted team lists and stuff like that as we get into it. But these are just guys, if you are someone that's making your team, putting your team together right now, these are a few of the guys that I'd be looking into. Really, just the goal of this is just to see what type of role they're going to get, and just get you thinking about the types of ways, like we spoke about in the last video, of the kind of players that you'd be looking to get into your side, those with upside, those that are going to be really strong keepers in your team going forward. But we'll go from there. We're going to start with the Tigers, and a very interesting team in terms of their quality. The biggest issue here I'm going to be seeing with adding Tigers players to your squad, as we'll talk about a little bit with the outside backs, is just the quality of ball they're going to get for the outside backs. For example, how many attacking stats are their halves going to get, and how much work their forwards are going to get through. And the most consistent part about the Tigers is their forwards, and through the middle there, their hooking options, and also their middle guys and edges, just because they're going to get that work through the tackling and the normal runs. But the attacking stats should be fairly limited again this year. And I'm thinking from the year, from 2023, they should be getting some better ball. But we'll go through a couple of players that I'm interested in, and one of them is Utoi Ikamanu, Stefano there at 557k. I think that obviously his end to the season was pretty good in terms of that 8-game average there of 55.75. He did have 3 tries there to make up that average, but if he's scoring in the even close to a 50 average, he's a couple hundred k underpriced. Well, just about 150 to 200k underpriced if he can get anywhere near that 55 average there. So that's something to think about with him. And he was someone that, yes, he scored 3 tries in that period, but there's a reason he did. He really stepped up his game and became a leader in their forward pack for the Tigers. So for me, the opportunity is there for him to increase his minutes, as you did see in that 55 average for that 8-game stretch. Will that continue for him? At this stage, there's a bit of a lack of really strong, heavy hitting forwards. You've got guys like Alex Twal, obviously Tarmau, being there last year. You're not guys that are going to make that massive impact, more of that leaders in the pack, whereas I think Stefano really needs to step up for the Tigers to do it any good. And I really feel like he built into the season nicely. So for me, he's someone that I'm definitely interested in at that 550 K price point. If he was somewhere in the 600s, I think it's probably a little too expensive with not as much upside. But for Stefano there's a chance that he becomes a keeper. And that will leave him, a couple hundred K or 150K at least underpriced if you can get him into that early 50s average. So he's someone to think about there. Tyrone Peachy is another one that I'm personally not currently interested in. But the question with him, he moves over from the Titans. Does his role change in any way? I'd imagine he'd be playing that middle rover sort of role. But there's a lot of times for the Titans that he got limited minutes, the mid-20s minutes. Sometimes he'd play higher minutes and he'd have a really direct involvement in terms of in the attacking side of things. He moves from a Titans team to a Tigers team that's probably going to be a little bit worse attacking-wise. So I think the opportunities he gets there will be limited. But he is someone that we need to be thinking about because of the change of role. Change of team, which may change something with his role. But that's something we're going to have to look at when we get to the trials for Tyrone Peachy there. Next one, a little bit more interesting in terms of Jackson Hastings. So he comes over from the Super League, obviously getting Man of Steel over there, doing really well. He's someone that I actually brought up his stats. So for Hastings, he has someone, for those that don't know, he did play a fair few years in the NRL, leaving after the 2018 season or during that season. I can't exactly remember. But if you look back to when he was playing halfback on a regular basis, he has a lot of really good scores here. You're looking at 80-minute efforts at halfback or 5'8", and you're looking at a lot of scores in the 40s, mid-30s, and a few 50 plus there. So for me, he has a little bit of potential as someone that could score pretty well, especially what we saw last year being the fact that a lot of the halves scoring had increased a little bit. There's a lot more ball in play, a lot more kicking, so kick meters for those guys, and then obviously a lot more try assists and stuff to boot with the increased scoring. So this really is really helpful for them. And at that 450k price point, I think he becomes a very interesting option. Is he going to kick more? He's going to be next to Brooks. Is that something that will help him? Will they share the kicking, in general play? I think they probably will share it. But if Hastings can be that player that really controls the game, let's say, because you had Adam Dewey was more of an attacking six last year when he played six, and Brooks had to be more of the controlling player. I think if they can switch those roles and have Brooks as more of the running six, he's so fast and so agile on his feet that I think that's where they'll get the best out of Brooks, and Hastings can be that real dominant half. Then I think the Tigers can play better, and that would be more beneficial for Hastings. So keep that in mind when you're looking at Hastings. I'd be really clear on seeing what happens in the trials in terms of, is he going to be the dominant kicker? Okay, that's going to be your biggest thing. And if that's the case, then he's going to be a little bit underpriced at 450k, be able to make a 100 or 200k for you and get some good scores at the start of the season. And at this stage, I feel like we'll see as we go through the teams, but there's a lot of solid underpriced halves at the moment. So it'll be interesting to see what kind of situation we have in terms of our combinations. Is it going to be a Cleary? Are we going to be going to cheaper halves? We'll work that out. And my last little point on the Tigers was just their centre spot to start the year. So we saw what happened with Sini, Tommy Talau, Roberts last year. Cheap centres didn't go very well at all, and there is going to be a spot open for them. So I'd only get around at a base price, and even then I probably wouldn't be interested in them. So move to the Sharks, and a couple of interesting options here. Pretty clear as the guys that I'm looking at. Most of the guys in the Sharks team aren't going to be of too much importance, I don't think, or have too much value. And the two guys that I'm interested in are Cam McInnes, coming back from his ACL injury, and also Nicho Hynes moving over from the Storm. So with Cam, we've seen what he's like over the past few seasons before he got injured. Most people had him as a lock in their team for last year before he went down with that injury. So the question's going to be, how's he going to perform after that? And the type of game that Cam has, I don't believe that it's going to affect him too much. He's at 780k, so he's already priced in the high 50s there. And I see him as a potential captaincy option for anyone's team. Now, I think that's a really good option. If that's the case, you can also sit on him and wait a little bit. It could be someone like Payne Haas at a similar price point that you might be more comfortable captaining or more comfortable putting in your team based on McInnes coming off that injury, but Payne Haas did have a couple of surgeries on his ankles, I believe, in the off season as well. So McInnes is going to be that solid option. You're not going to be worrying about him each week in terms of his consistency. He's going to be somewhere between that high 40s as a small, a lower score for him, to up in the 70s, 80s, and 90s and 100s on the odd occasions when he makes 50 tackles and scores a try, for example, for 150 meters in that one there. So that's Cam McInnes, and I think he's someone that just to keep an eye on. As someone you can potentially keep for the entire year, because he shouldn't be playing Origin or anything like that. So I think he's a very solid option, and I'm interested. Nicho Hynes, the big one for him. He's moving over from the Storm, and he's moving into a role that is undefined at the moment. We have the opportunity for Trindle to be his number 7, and if that's the case, who's going to be the dominant kicker? If it's Moylan as his number 6 and Hynes playing 7, then you'd expect Nicho to be more of a dominant kicker in general play. And I think if that's the case, I think he's a better option in your side than if Trindle's there, because I think Trindle will split the role with Nicho. When he's played in the halves for the Storm, he hasn't been too much of a kicker in general play. So that's something to consider as well. Again, it's something to look at in the trials, just how much in general play kicking he's going to have. The Sharks are going to be pretty solid as a team, though. So expect him to still get the attacking stats that he was getting at the Storm. Obviously, the Storm's probably a better team, definitely a better team than the Sharks, even though Sharks are going to be on the way up. There could be some growing pains moving over to the Sharks, I think, for sure. But at 602k, who is a half and wing fullback dual, I think if he can average over 50, you're going to be getting him at a discount in the wing fullback position. Just going to be depending. I personally wouldn't be picking him in the halves. I'd pick in the wing fullbacks. But if you like him as a player, and there's definitely no issue as to picking him in your side. In terms of our outside backs, they're pretty thin. So I was just wanted to mention that in there, that if they have they have a few backups in Tay Wilton and these guys, but if they happen to blood a new centre or a young centre, then this is the kind of team that you're looking for that type of young fella to come in and actually score around that 30 average. Just thinking of when we spoke about the Tigers, there being not such a good team, rookies coming into better teams like the Sharks, I think will serve you better. So just have a look at that one across the year. But yeah, that's kind of what I'm thinking there with those young fellas. And we'll move to our last two teams for this video. And we're going to be talking about the Raiders. And there's some interesting ones here. Foggs was someone I had in my team for the majority last year, injured in and out, and then ended up getting injured again. And Toby Sexton came in and played pretty well, and they left Foggs out for a bit, so it was a bit painful. And that sees him drop his price a little bit to finish the year, just with a bit of an interrupted in and outs, a couple of injuries, a couple of really low scores. There was negative in there, another one under 10. So he comes at a slight discount, but he's moving from the Titans to the Raiders, so he should be a little bit better. You'd expect that he has the ability to be a cut price keeper, as I've said there. He's not going to be as consistent as other guys in your team. I spoke about what McInnes is going to be like, or some of the other halves. If you're looking at Cleary, obviously he's the best of the best, but DCE, all these types of guys, they're going to have scores in the low 40s and then scores 90, 100. Whereas Foggs can have the odd 20-odd game, and he can also hit the high ones as well. So that volatility, do you want that in your side at 655k? I'm not exactly sure, especially when there's a lot of halves going in the game at the moment going around. The other two guys to speak about in this one is Chance Nickel Clickstore. Can't even say it properly now. Been a while. So CNK we'll go with, and then Xavier Savage. So CNK at 437 is very interesting. He's someone that pushed the Raiders into the final series into the finals against the Roosters that year. Had his injury last year and came back really late, but did have an immediate impact. So it'll be interesting to see if he ends up in the one position, or if Xavier Savage gets it. If Savage gets it, he's a very, very dynamic player, especially to the eye. You could see that he had so much talent, plenty of speed to burn. So if he gets that number one spot, Savage, I think he's a great option, but everyone's going to have him if that's the case. If CNK gets it, is it going to be something that he's going to sustain for the entire year? Or is he going to be moving? I saw a predicted lineup from one of the writers there that he might play in the centres, and they might have Savage at one. But if there's injuries and stuff, all that can change pretty quickly. So I'm definitely interested in both of them, but it's going to be a wait and see based on trials, I think, with that. Okay, and our last but not least is going to be the Manly side. So Olakau'atu, I think, is an interesting option. Not one I'm currently thinking about putting into my side, just more based around the price. So 620k, you're needing someone, if you're picking someone up at this point. If we look at guys like Tino last year in the mid 500s, they needed to push on to keeper status for him to be worth it. Otherwise, you could have picked guys that are a lot cheaper and used the money elsewhere, whether that's upgrading a 650k player to a top tier Cleary or something like that. That money is very can very much be used elsewhere to improve your side. So someone like Olakau'atu at the price, even though he's a mid and an edge dual, I think he's I think he has the potential to break out into being a keeper, but I also think he's too volatile in terms of his scoring to be able to do that this year. In this year coming, we spoke about Stefano in terms of that ability. I think they both have that ability to take the next step and be more consistent in terms of their scoring. But for him to get 30s pretty regularly as like his base, and then if he scores a try or two, he can get 70. He scored a fair few tries last year, and I think that puts him in too much of a high bracket for him to be worth my getting into my side. But he's someone that if he has a bit of a slow start and then you can actually see the build up in progression, if you can get him somewhere in the early 500s, I think he would be a good shout to get into anyone's side. So not someone I'm thinking about from the start, but I think has a lot of potential going forward. And lastly, we're just going to talk about Andrew Davies. So he's someone that we all, well, not all, but a lot of people picked up early on last year. He came in, had an awesome run to start the game, picked up 3 tackle breaks, and then ended up doing his ACL and losing the ball in the same play. So for him, he's got a little bit of talent. You've seen the games that he has played, anywhere from 40 to 80 minutes. His PPM's great. So for him at 240k, coming in at basement price, if there happens to be an injury to Olakau'atu, I'm going to say Siren and Schuster, sorry. Or Schuster, for example, in the back row, then if Davey gets that opportunity somewhere in the back row or just the forward pack in general, then I think at 240k he could be a really, really good moneymaker for anyone's side. So again, just someone to have in your black book. when you're making your side and heading into season 2022. But that's probably it for today, guys. I'm going to be, as they're going through 4 teams in each video, and just sort of making an update every 5 to 6 days for this next little bit. Just going through these types of players here before we get more information. There's not too much importance on making your team very early at this point, but for those that are, I hope you enjoyed this video and get a lot out of it, and this helps you, I suppose, create that starter side and feel a little bit more comfortable with what you've got there. But as always, guys, I hope you enjoyed it. Please do like, subscribe, and we'll catch you in the next one. See you later, guys.